Now the purpose of these videos is for me to explore the bearing that the realization that your life is limited and finite has on things like your relationship to life, how you can give it meaning and purpose, and how to relate to the people around you. But before we can go there, we need to address our own attitudes to our own deaths, because that is something that you need to come to grips with before you can expand these realizations and make them include how to relate to other people. So here goes. Now, the people are generally quite afraid of death. And that's natural, because death to us seems like this huge unknown. To many people, death is like this big black box and you have no idea what's inside. And that is, of course, very, very scary indeed. On top of that, there are religious bigots who keep on throwing around all these crazy ideas about hellfire, brimstone and damnation, as if it being such a big unknown wasn't bad enough. The good news is that all of that is, of course, bullshit, but that doesn't change the fact that death seems like such a big unknown. And the rescue, the solution to that problem, comes from Epicurus. He had a deep realization, or at least he passed it on, he documented it, that death is indeed nothing to worry about. And it's this word nothing that is so pertinent to the argument. You know, the original argument went something like, when we are, death is not. As long as we exist, there is no death as far as we're concerned. And then when death has come, we are not. So we are not there to experience it. And that's the important realization here. Death is not a state of being. That is what Epicurus realized. And it makes so much sense if you think about it, obviously. You know, you die, you cease to exist. But our language is so corrupt in this regard that there's no wonder that people are so confused about this subject. Every time somebody dies, we confuse the matter by saying things like he or she has passed on, or they have gone. They haven't gone. In order to be gone, you have to go somewhere. But when you're dead, you've ceased to exist. Even the simplest term that we use, he or she is dead, is confusing because it sounds like dead is a state of being, which it's not. And once that realization has really sunk in, you realize that death is indeed nothing to fear, because you will never, ever experience being dead. You can't be dead. You die, and then you're no longer there. You no longer exist. That's it. End of story. No pain. Nothing to worry about. Now obviously some people will say, even if they accept this, they will say, okay, but the process of dying might be problematic, might be painful, and so on and so forth. Yeah, but how often don't you hear that somebody who died just quietly slipped away? Talk to any palliative carer and they will tell you this, that more often than not, the person dying just in a very dignified way quietly slipped away. And even if you die in something like, for example, an accident, have you ever been in an accident? An accident is a very strange experience. I've been in a couple, and there is no such thing as pain or discomfort while the accident is taking place. The pain and discomfort come later, when you're sitting on the ground with your broken leg or whatever, and you're dazed and confused and wondering what has just happened, and then suddenly the pain starts hitting you. But if you're dead, you will not be in that position. you will no longer exist at that point in time when the trauma could set in. This is even true for prolonged trauma. But of course you will, in that case, experience the pain and the discomfort while you are suffering the trauma. But even then, it is usually a very disassociative process to be undergoing that amount of suffering. And typically, the worst of suffering happens by the trauma that sets in afterwards. And again, there is no afterwards when you die. So, even if you are obsessed by this idea of dying, I would urge you to consider the fact that in the large majority of possibilities of how you might die, you will not actually suffer at all. And even in the few cases where you would, you will be disassociating yourself to such an extent that suffering is never going to be the way that you are imagining it now. And that is another reason not to fear death at all. Now, of course, there are other considerations. The things that you will miss out on. The people you will leave behind. But that is another video story. That's something I'm going to be talking about later. But from a personal perspective, there is no reason to fear death. There's one consideration though that I would like to impart on you that may be a bit unpleasant to hear, especially if there's anybody listening to this video who might be suffering at this moment and who might be thinking about ending it all. Somebody with suicidal ideas. You do need to realize, apart from anything else, that all you will achieve is that you limit the amount of suffering. You reduce the amount of suffering that you have to endure. If you, however, think about suicide as a way to escape your suffering, then I would urge you to think again, because the only experiences you will ever have are while you are alive. For most people that is reason not to fear death. But if you are thinking about suicide, that is a reason to seriously reconsider death. Because if you are going to limit your suffering by ending it all, you do have to realize that you are making sure that the remainder of your life will be spent suffering. That is something that you can't forget. Anyway, that is another day's subject as well.